podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
When you're smiling. Hey, you. Bubbly sparkling water is crisp, refreshing, and perfect for any occasion. Kind of like my voice, but in a can. No calories, no sweeteners, all smiles. Bubbly. Crack a smile.
Love tennis with Matchpoint Tennis Championships. Grab your gear and get ready for authentic gameplay and an immersive tennis experience. Pre-order now from Game.
Welcome back to the Love Tennis podcast with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. As always, I'm joined by our resident coach, Calvin Betton, and our resident writer, George Belshaw. We've got loads to talk about this week. We are speaking on Sunday evening, just after all the various finals in Queens, in Stuttgart, in Nottingham, in Schertenbosch, and I'm sure a couple of others that I'm missing, and definitely more that I'm mispronouncing. As always, if you want to get your name or your comments read out on the podcast, there's loads of ways you can do that. You can find us on Twitter at LoveTennisPod. You can send us an email, lovetennispod@gmail.com, or you can leave us a 5-star review, which is exactly what Keiko has done this week. I hate to read it out, but I have to. It's my rule. George is very funny. Love this podcast. All three of them are fun, but George really makes me laugh. I had an in-person review during the French Open, which said, no, I really enjoy it. You know, Calvin shooting from the hip and George trying to be funny, which was my my favourite comment on that. So just to take
probably a more accurate reflection, isn't it?
We've also had a 1-star review. I don't usually read them out, but you know, I thought I'd read it out because people might laugh. Easily the most anti-Nadal podcast you will ever hear. Don't dream of listening to it if you're a Nadal fan. I'd love to hear from some Nadal fans who think that we've been aggressively anti-Nadal. I happen to think he's potentially the best player of all time, but that makes me anti-Nadal.
Yeah, I feel like we've spoken in pretty glowing terms about Nadal this year. I mean, he's literally unbelievable. Doing amazing things. Like last week, we were kind of saying, presuming this came after last week's episode, but I mean, last week we were literally saying, I cannot believe he's just won the French Open like that. That's amazing an achievement. But anyway, I'll be more glowing. That's probably my fault, to be fair.
Maybe we should be more praiseworthy of people at all times. Anyway, neither here nor there. But thanks very much for getting in touch, I suppose. We've also had a couple of other emails. One from Elliot Wilson, who has said that he doesn't have Apple Music or Spotify, so couldn't leave us a 5-star review, although he says he did do one on his girlfriend's account. So I thank you for that, Elliot. He says the banter's great between the three of you. That's very kind. I try not to read out the praise because it's just embarrassing. What was the one? Oh, no, I can't do this because he's criticising another podcast. Says he doesn't like it quite so much as ours. Overall, Elliot, thank you very much for getting in touch. Most of this is quite embarrassingly lovely. So I will just say thanks for that. And if you've got any other views on tennis, feel free to send them in. One from Laurie McKenzie as well. Says, I've been really enjoying the Grand Slam podlets. That's true. During our Wimbledon, we'll be doing a podlet every single day. Sometimes it'll just be me. Sometimes it'll be all three of us. Sometimes it'll be me and George, or George and Calvin. He says he really enjoys Calvin's insights into the tennis tour and tactical analysis of matches. As a tennis coach myself, I always feel like I learn something new from how he talks about tennis. I even found myself using his stat about Stan Wawrinka's ratio of forehand to backhand winners in a coaching session yesterday. Thanks to all of you for all your hard work on the podcast and making it such a great listen for us tennis fans. I'm sorry if I missed your review or your comment on Twitter. I've been a little bit remiss with the mailbag because it's been so busy lately, but I will hopefully be back on track over the grass court season. And maybe that is where we're going to start today, with the grass court season, because Andy Murray was in a grass court final for the first time in 6 years since he won Wimbledon back in 2016. He was beaten by Matteo Berrettini in a pretty close 3-set match. It's a lot of points for him to pick up in Stuttgart. It would have, of course, been 500. Had he 500? 250. Have I made that up? George?
250, I think.
Yeah, he couldn't have been 500. The coverage was so poor. But he will shoot up the rankings nevertheless. I think he is now into the top 50 and has a realistic chance of being seeded for Wimbledon. George, very encouraging to see Murray playing quite so well on grass. To quote you from earlier today, Murray is good.
Yeah, I thought he played really well. I've realised I left something off the order of I just want to very briefly vent about as well. You sort of touched on it there, but how ludicrously difficult was it to watch this week? I actually ended up finding it on Sky Bet. They were showing the final today.
I mean, so I believe it was shown on Tennis Channel International with a one-person commentary, which got a very poor review on Twitter. And I watched it on Tennis TV, which is obviously subscription $9.99. It wasn't even a very good quality stream, and there was no commentary on it. It was pretty. I just
refuse to take on another subscription at this stage. I've just got too many sports subscriptions.
I only do it because I expense it. But yeah,
but it's quite funny. I'd seen all week people tweeting about there's a 1 week trial to watch this, and then realised that's everywhere outside the UK. I was like, am I being an idiot? I can't find this trial. But yeah, anyway, Murray was really good. Obvious slight concern with kind of I think it was an ab injury in the end. I mean, he was having his other hip. Do you call it another hip or one hip? I couldn't decide whether is the hip the same bone. And then the left side of his hip anyway.
Hips.
You have two separate hips. Are they not all
Are you
part
getting
of the
confused
pelvis?
with the pelvis? No, the hip joint.
Oh, there you go.
It's a ball and socket joint, isn't it? I don't think I've ever considered that I've only got one hip. That's insane.
I wasn't really sure. Anyway,
I am sure you're being a complete idiot.
I just wasn't sure if it was like a left side and a right side, but they were all actually connected the whole time. Anyway, I'm probably totally wrong.
I mean, all bones are connected, George. It's kind of how it works.
Yeah, true. My knees are very connected.
George, did you think they took Andy Murray's entire hip out? When they
yeah, you make a fair point.
Just had nothing like in the middle.
Yeah, okay. Actually, yeah. The more I've just said that out loud, now the more ridiculous.
He had to regrow his entire arse after he had that double hip.
Yeah, fair comments
in
all
the
around.
whole legs and everything.
We'll be getting some 1-star reviews next week for absolutely terrible anatomical knowledge from me. And again, terrible attempts to be funny. But yeah, it was funny because they were like massaging the other hip, it seemed to be, and then I think he's come out and said it was an ab problem afterwards.
Indeed, yeah. So he spoke on court, and I actually thought it was quite interesting that on court, Matteo Berrettini was very gracious, and he mentioned that it wasn't the way he wanted to finish, and that he had obviously been a little bit injured. But I thought it was interesting that he said, "Yeah, you just sort of, you were clearly hurt," and then Murray stood up and said, "Well, yeah, like he didn't really talk about it. He sort of said, I'm actually feeling pretty optimistic about the next couple of weeks, and as long as my body holds up, it'll be fine." And then in press afterwards, he said that it's an ab injury. He's not really felt it before, and then he'll just have to get it checked out. It was interesting that he said to his box during the match, he said, "From the baseline, it's fine, but like I can't serve." And then he said that's what happens with these big breaks. So obviously there was a bit of a break after the second set. 'Cause I think Berrettini went off court, and I wondered whether he just stiffened up a bit.
I've just quickly looked at a site called 5 Cool Facts About Hip Bones, and actually each hip bone is made up of 3 bones. So you're even more wrong? In parts, even more wrong. Yeah, there are 3 bones in the hip apparently, even though it looks like one big bone.
I would love to make you do a GCSE biology exam. I would be fascinated.
I did A-level biology, but we didn't do much on hips.
Right. Should we try and get back to tennis? Because you've actually derailed us really quickly there. Andy Murray, incidentally, he didn't just play one match in Stuttgart. Of course, he played 5. He beat Christian O'Connell, Alexander Bublik, Stefanos Tsitsipas, most significantly. That is his first win against a top 5 player since the ATP World Tour Finals in 2016. And, I mean, I don't know, we've talked much about Stefanos Tsitsipas on grass. I think it's a blooming good win.
Backs up my theory, Cilic is a bigger favourite for Wimbledon than Tsitsipas.
You really do just get a bee in your bonnet and keep buzzing. Unbelievable. He beat Kyrgios in the semi-finals as well, I should have said.
Yeah, it's a good result. I mean, he's always kind of had Kyrgios' number. Obviously, I think we'll talk about that a little bit later, but something unsavoury happened in that match, and that seemed to heavily impact Kyrgios, but it was a really good tight first set. But yeah, look, it is a really good win over Tsitsipas. Murray is still absolutely brilliant on grass. We've spoken about the movement and how difficult it is. If Murray's body would hold up, there's no reason he couldn't go really deep in Wimbledon and kind of mix it with this kind of weakened field, I don't think. But it's just worry he's not going to be able to stand up against back-to-back best-of-5 matches. And, we've seen again today, this was a tough 3-hour match against Berrettini, and you'd think the grass would probably be the best surface in terms of a lot of the matches are a little bit quicker, but he has just such a tendency to make matches so long and ridiculously long and turn into big overdrawn things that it's going to be really, really a big challenge for him to keep going. But, I think what we're seeing is a lot of vindication about his logic to kind of really go for Wimbledon, because you can just see he really is just a cut above everyone on grass, really. I think he's an absolute grass court specialist in many ways, despite being amazing everywhere else. He just has such a high level on it.
Well, he's also just played a lot more than anyone else. I was talking to Cam Norrie earlier today because he was doing his pre-match media at Queen's, and I said, well, how much actually had you played on grass before you came to Europe? He came over at 15, is that right? And he said, well, none. I had never seen a grass court before, basically until I was 15, other than on TV. And then he didn't play any grass tennis in college, obviously, because there isn't any. So he basically played juniors and then none in college. So he's got so little experience on the surface, and he's a British number one. So when you take guys who come from countries where there are even fewer grass courts, it's basically 2 tournaments a year sometimes. And so I think Murray's got the game, but he's also had a massive advantage because he trained on clay for a bit and then he just went straight onto the grass. He's just had so much more time getting used to it. The guys might catch up when it comes to Wimbledon, but Calvin, you'd think just all of those different steps lead to him having a real edge on the field, at least for a bit.
Yeah, I think this is one of his best tournaments since he's come back. I think it definitely holds more weight than when he made the final in Australia earlier on in the year. Was it Sydney or Adelaide?
Sydney. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, he looked really good this week in the little bits that I saw, and the win against Tsitsipas, and then Kyrgios on the grass. Although I didn't see it, but I'm led to believe it was standard. Kyrgios meltdown. I think big wins, and it would really help him if he could get seeded. Do we know if he's going to yet?
So it's not certain. They're obviously based on the rankings the Monday before the tournament, so he's got one more week of points to pick up.
Okay.
He's currently
he needs 2 wins, doesn't he, at Queen's? But so has to meet Berrettini round 2, possibly.
He's 47 in the world, and I think the seeding cutoff is going to be 37. So he needs another 85 points, which I think would be 2 rounds. It's not going to be easy, but I think 2 wins would pretty much do it. He could probably do with a few people.
Is he definitely going to play?
Is he definitely going to play Queen's? As far as we know, yes. As of time of recording, he is due to do pre-match media tomorrow, and he is down to play Lorenzo Sonego in the first round on Tuesday. So, as far as anyone is aware, he's going to play, but I would have thought he'll go and have a scan on this ab problem and then find out. My guess... God, it's tough, isn't it? Because the seeding would be so big. But if he plays and it means he can't play at all. I guess the thing is, if he plays and wins 2 rounds, he's then got 10 days, and they'll give him a Tuesday start if he wants one at Wimbledon. So he's then got potentially, best part of 2 weeks almost to recover from what if it's not torn or anything. And as we know, you can win an Australian Open with a torn ab muscle anyway. So my guess would be he plays. I don't know about you, Calvin. You look pensive.
I wouldn't be so certain. I think he probably will, but I don't think he will definitely play. Is Berrettini definitely playing?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose the difference with him is that he's obviously had a hand injury, which he seems to be absolutely fine with, and I guess hand injuries is not muscular, right? It's not quite the same.
I forgot it was a hand injury because he had the problem he was having repeatedly last year was that ab injury, wasn't it? And it was strange that he ended up being out for a period because of a completely different injury.
The big issue Berrettini's got is the amount of points he's defending, and obviously going to lose at Wimbledon. I don't think he'll be skipping anything. He needs. He won Queen's last year, so to lose 1,500 points in one go would not be ideal.
1,700 points actually. It's 1250 for the final, isn't it? So he would lose it. He would lose it. Or I mean that would probably drop him 10 places in the world rankings, which obviously puts you into a different bracket, means you're not going to get necessarily seeded at certain tournaments anymore. Would be quite significant for Berrettini.
Seedings at the US Open are going to be all over the shop, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be wild. I mean, Djokovic is already down to number 3 as of Monday morning, which is just weird. beyond belief. I mean, there is a very real possibility that like Rafa Nadal could overtake Novak Djokovic in the world rankings, before the US Open, which is, I mean, I guess it's not that weird because he has won 2 Grand Slams this year. But it's like
it's had a decent year, hasn't it?
I know, but I don't think that. In my head, I don't think that Rafa Nadal should be a higher ranked player than Novak Djokovic at the moment. I don't really know why.
We can't have Nadal negativity, James. You heard the review. Nadal deserves to be world number 1 and is the best player on the planet. That's all I'm saying right now.
Great. But now you're annoying fans of all the other 99 players in the top 100 who have a legitimate claim. I don't know. You can't win trying to please people, George. That's not why we're here. We're not here to please people. We're here to. Well, I don't really know why we're here. Probably not the time for an existential crisis. You mentioned Nick Kyrgios there, George. There was a sort of unsavoury incident. We haven't really had a full investigation into it. I don't really know. We will never probably know what was said. The tournament released a statement saying you can't discriminate against players. It's unacceptable, and anyone found to be doing it will be kicked out. Kyrgios said that he was someone used a racial slur against him on court. That they were telling him to shut up and play, and he didn't like that. It's difficult because if someone racially abuses you, absolutely. What I was confused by was he said someone used a racial slur against me, and then he said the comment like someone called him a black sheep, which this sort of feels a little bit like the guerrilla tactics Serena Williams territory, which I don't really understand. I don't know whether
There's been quite a lot of stuff about the origins of the word black sheep, though, and I think actually it's kind of not good. Basically,
right.
It actually is quite heavily like.
I didn't know that was like a racially charged comment. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, okay. Well, you learned something.
That's the thing. I think it's like something that people use, within kind of recent memory, used to say quite often. But I've read a couple of pieces around it. I think, and actually going back into its origins and stuff, and it's definitely pretty not cool and racist.
I see. Okay, interesting. Well, every day's a school day. I mean, I'm not here to sit and say you can't play the racism card. I don't like that, but I did find it a bit odd. But that probably makes a bit more sense now. That said, I appreciate that on this occasion, Nick Kyrgios was quite within his rights to throw the toys out the pram, for want of a better phrase. It's also not beyond Nick Kyrgios's ken to kind of lose concentration during a match. I don't think that's unfair to say, albeit that this time he had legitimate reason to do so. It's kind of a weird situation to find yourself in. I mean, I suppose he did at least make the semi-finals, and therefore Nick Kyrgios on grass is still a threat. And like him or hate him, I think we all agree that Nick Kyrgios playing well in the grass court season is pretty good for the game.
Yeah, Calvin kind of mentioned the seedings for the US Open being messed up, but the fact Kyrgios is a potential first rounder for anyone that's a nightmare draw. First round of Wimbledon. Ugo Humbert was the unlucky one last year. I'm not saying I think Kyrgios can win the tournament, but he's played quite well this year, to be fair, and seemed fairly focused by the odd meltdown. Calvin will probably roll his eyes at me saying that, but you definitely don't want to be playing in first 3 rounds at Wimbledon. He's a serious grass court player, and he's got so many weapons that work just so well on that surface.
Well, he's got 2 weapons that work quite well on that surface. Let's be quite frank. And it's his first serve and second serve, which are often I mean, that's unfair. He's also got a pretty handy forehand.
He's got great touch as well. I mean,
I suppose so. I don't really think about Nick Kyrgios' touch because I think about his power.
He's a super volleyer. I mean, he really is a lovely net player.
He's good. He has got good touch and he's got good volleys.
But he also gets to play a lot of easy volleys because it's what we always talk about. Like Alcaraz. Alcaraz is not a good volleyer, but he often gets to play some really easy volleys because he follows the ball. He follows.
I think
the big
technically
shots.
Nick's up there on the tour in terms of best feel around the net.
Who's the best, Calvin? Best volleyer on tour?
You say Murray, don't you, Corfin?
I was actually having this conversation yesterday with one of Britain's top 3 players, and figure out just on basis of geography which one it was. That person I was talking to is up there.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, did he say himself?
No, I was listing the players, and then he just commented on what he thought. Although he did say and this differed from my opinion, he thought Alcaraz was. But he did say, I'll tell you what, what this person did say that, and we said that Zverev has. And when I said that Zverev, I'll roll it out again, so I roll it out every week. But Zverev has the worst volleys in the top 200, and he said he doesn't. He said he's got the second worst volleys in the top 200, but the other player is also in the top 10. So who do you think who do you think he says has got the worst volleys in the top 200?
That's interesting.
Try to think who might have played to come to that opinion as well. I wondered if it might be Berrettini or Medvedev.
No, he said Medvedev. He's actually said Medvedev has got decent volleys and it works obsessively on his volleys as well, apparently.
Berrettini? Rublev. It's going to be Rublev.
Rublev. And it's not one that stood out to me because I've not seen Rublev play many.
He plays a lot of doubles though, Rublev, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he said no. He said he's
But famously, according to the second most recent men's doubles champions, you don't have to serve and volley to win doubles, and therefore maybe you don't have to volley that much. And we do say that Rublev plays a lot of doubles. He doesn't win a huge number of doubles matches, as far as I recall.
No, him and Khachanov.
Have reached finals and stuff.
They've tapered off a bit in the last year, but before that, they were winning quite a bit.
All right. Well, he's playing doubles this week in Halle. I will find out who with right now. He's playing with Ilya Ivashka, the exiled Belarusian player. They're playing Dustin Brown and Dominic Stricker in the first round. That should be a fun watch, at least. He's also got Nicholas Basilashvili in the first round of the singles. So Rublev's the guy to watch if you're in Germany this week.
I saw him. I don't know why this popped into my head, you saying that, but I saw Hercats was playing with Pavic this week as well, or 1 week quite recently.
That's an absolute get. Yeah, I mean, he was
playing. Megtic and Pavic are playing together at Queen's.
But I think last week or the week before, Hercats
they won to follow up on that, George. Yes, they won the title. Hercats and Pavic won the title in Stuttgart, which I mean I'm not surprised.
Great win for Hercats.
Yeah, they even came through the always tricky Tsitsipas and Tsitsipas pairing in the course. I mean, in fairness to Petros, they did go to a champions tiebreak. Like they were the only pair to take a set off them all week. So
Hercats plays a lot of doubles though. Hercats plays a lot with Felix, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's a good doubles player. He's got a good game for doubles. You know,
he volleys well. Hercats volleys well.
Yeah. I guess I was just more surprised that Megtic wasn't playing with Pavic that week.
I think that occasionally happens. Like sometimes, especially at the 250s, one of the players just won't fancy it. Wants a week off or something. Or, I mean, for example, I noticed that Mahou is playing with somebody else at Queen's this week, but Herbert is playing at Ilkley Challenger. So I assume Herbert, don't know his ranking. Maybe he's trying to get in Wimbledon qualies.
A fine question. He's not you.
Or maybe the draw's out. I don't know. Maybe he's trying to get some singles. Maybe he's already in Wimbledon. He's trying to get some singles matches.
His ranking will have dipped a bit because he didn't go to Australia, did he? Because he was one of the.
Are we talking singles ranking?
Yeah, singles
ranking. Yeah.
And Herbert is 170 in the world, so he's already missed the cut for Wimbledon. Yeah. So he'd be in qualies, but
then maybe he's wanting some singles matches ahead of qualies.
It's weird. I mean, Pierre-Hugues Herbert, every time I read a story about him, I'm like, are you normal? Like, he just always seems to come out with some crackpot theory. I mean, quite apart from the anti-vax stuff, it just seems like an alternative thinker, I think is the technical term for people like him. Well, speaking of rankings and actually speaking of Wimbledon qualifiers as well, probably the biggest sleeper in the Wimbledon qualifying draw will be Tim van Rijthoven, the new Dutch number 3, who has gone up 99 places in the rankings after winning his first ever ATP title. He beat none other than Daniil Medvedev in the final and I apologise to our Dutch listeners for mispronouncing this place, 's-Hertogenbosch, which, again, I don't even know if that's even close, but it's the best I can do. He beat Medvedev, he beat all top 3 seeds, he beat Fritz, he beat Felix Auger-Aliassime, beat Hugo Gaston and Matthew Ebden to win his first ever ATP title. I mean, George, where on earth does this bloke come from?
I was going to say, I've got a little tip for you as well. People often call it Rosmalen rather than S-Hertogenbosch to kind of get around.
I didn't know they were the same thing. I thought
the same thing.
Ah, there you go.
So there you go. That's your little tip.
Right.
I was very proud. S-Hertogenbosch is one of the things I learnt to write during my days writing about tennis.
Something you learnt to write. It's
just like one of those.
George. They're just English letters.
No. But just like like one of those spellings.
Do you mean spell?
I'd never. Yeah. Spell. Yeah. Sorry, but it's like one of those words, isn't it? Like you learn to spell like really odd.
I tell you what, George.
Yeah,
you are massively Love Tennis Podcast dunce cap for George tonight. When they did your haircut, did they take off a bit of your brain as well?
I've had a bit of a heavy weekend, to be honest, James.
George Belshaw. This is why we don't record on Sunday nights very often, because George usually is still hungover.
You can tell I'm not very sharp. But you know what I mean. Like there are things in sports writing that you would never spell such ridiculously hard words like names and stuff, and that is definitely up there with like quite. It's
like FC Midtjylland, who Man United
Peter
drew a couple of times.
The German bloke. That's a horrible name to spell.
Yeah, and
Wojciech Szczesny in football.
A friend of mine who I used to work with at the Express once spelt Wojciech Szczesny on stage in a pub quiz for £100 first time without even thinking about it.
Yeah,
incredible.
This is quite two Zs around the sea, isn't it? That's the trick.
Famously, 2 Zs around the sea. Calvin, I suppose you're going to have to be our point of reference for Tim van Rijthoven, the one-handed backhand Dutch player about whom we pretty much don't know anything else. Have you ever come across him before?
Not that I can remember, to be honest. I've seen his name around. He's not a complete anomaly, but I don't think I've been at any tournaments where he's been at.
George?
So I can't help you too much.
It was quite nice because Medvedev said they'd played each other a bit in juniors in post-match press, and he said, I always knew you had the talent, having seen you at that level, obviously taking you a bit longer to kind of get up here, but now you can kind of do this regularly. But it's been an astonishing week. I mean, it's one of the stories of the season, I think, really. Like it is amazing. Of like crazy wins. The bloke hadn't won an ATP match. He's gone and taken out Fritz, Auger-Aliassime, and Medvedev in the same week to win a title.
There's talk about him getting a Wimbledon wild card, which I think is probably a bit much. And
I think he probably will.
You reckon?
I do quite often like just giving random grass court wild cards for people to do that well.
I think a Wimbledon wild card.
I'll put a beer on it with you, Calvin.
Right, put a beer on it then, yeah, remember that.
Wimbledon wildcards are out on Wednesday, I believe, so you won't
just in time. I mean, to be fair, Wimbledon weren't giving Raducanu a bloody wildcard last year until they were politically peer-pressured into it.
Controversial statement, George. Don't know if I can follow that up with anything. After the break, we're going to talk a bit about Nottingham, where Dan Evans picked up a title, more doubles chat as well. And we'll also look ahead to Queens, the WTA in Berlin, and everyone who's pulled out of that. And the news that Sue Barker is stepping down from Wimbledon coverage.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. There are some monthly expenses you just can't get away from, like insurance. You might be looking at your expenses thinking you're going to have to pause on your DIY project, stop collecting vinyl, or even give up your daily coffee fix to have great insurance. Talk about a nightmare. It's a good thing State Farm knows everyone has a budget, and they have a range of options, like insuring your ride and your home with surprisingly great rates on both. With State Farm, you can also personalize your policy, so you get the coverage you need at a price that lets you keep up with your projects, add to your vinyl collection, and continue to enjoy your coffee habits. So forget about giving up what you love to have great insurance. For surprisingly great rates, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
The NBA Finals are here, and if it's your first time betting on FanDuel Sportsbook, you could bet $5 and get $200 in free bets guaranteed, which might feel a bit like this. But mostly, it feels like this. Sign up for FanDuel Sportsbook with promo code FINALS today.
21 plus and present in Virginia. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expires 14 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
This episode is brought to you by Cheetos Deja Tu Huella. Deja Tu Huella means leave your mark, and that's exactly what Latinos are doing all across the country. They're rewriting the rules and pushing the boundaries in their communities to leave their own unique mark. They use their gift, their superpoder, to make an impact, whether it's through art, music, fashion, food, or something else. And Cheetos will celebrate what they're doing by shining a light on their transformative power. The Deja Tu Huella program celebrates those leaving their mark in Latino communities. You can also celebrate by checking out the new podcast, Batman Unburied, on Spotify. Batman and Buried is presented by Cheetos Deja Tu Huella. Visit Batman and Buried on Spotify to learn more.
Now, the second biggest tournament in tennis, I suppose you might call it, but the biggest tournament in the Midlands, possibly in the whole year, was won by the Midlands' very own Dan Evans this week. He picked up the title without dropping a single set in the same month that he turned 32 years old. Means he will go up to number 31 in the world, which is a welcome little bump that might just get him into the next bracket of seeds for Wimbledon, so that'll be quite handy when it comes to finding his way through the draw. I was up in Nottingham on Tuesday to see Emma Raducanu play for all of 35 minutes, and I believe we then spoke about that a little bit later on last week. But it was a good week for Calvin. It's always a good week for Calvin at the moment. Can't stop winning. Although Pat and Cash stopped at the final hurdle, Calvin. It sounded heart-rending.
Yeah, they lost 16-14 in a Champions tiebreak in the final.
To a very strong fellow British pair, it should be said.
Yeah, they lost to Ken Skupski and Jonny O'Mara, who were second seeds, to be fair.
Is it still too soon to talk about it?
No, I maybe a couple of hours ago would have been. But I sent a message. We've got a text group with Henry and Julian and Barry, Julian's coach. And I sent a message earlier saying, I'm still not over it, lads. And Henry replied, going, grow up, Calv.
I was just going to ask you, like, when you go on such a winning run like that, to suddenly lose, you can feel like it could have like a big knock-on effect. You know, you kind of gone from feeling, oh yeah, we're invincible, we're never going to lose again, and then
I don't think so.
Like that can turn it. But
the Champions tiebreak's a weird one because if you get into it, and then if it's not close, it's fine. And if it's close up to a point, you start thinking, oh, this is tight. But then when it gets to a certain point where you think, right, this is now just a coin toss, doesn't make any difference. Because especially on a grass court doubles, just anything can happen when you're going at 2 points. Especially as the bad thing was that it started raining at about 7-all, like drizzling, relatively heavy. And then you think, the matches. It probably, wasn't raining enough at the time to call the match off. But then you think the match is going to be finished soon anyway.
Yeah.
Then by the time we got to like 14-all, it's been raining for about 10 minutes then. And then like apparently at the change of ends of 12-all, the umpire said to the guys like, "What do you think, lads?" And they were all like, we can't come off now. we can't come off at 12-all. Yeah. But I had this horrible feeling that the match would have got to be decided by, say, match point, someone serving and slipping.
Yeah.
And the ball just going past them. And I thought that would just be terrible. But it wasn't. No, it was, Look, they could have won. There's not much to read into it. They could have won and we'd be sat here saying everything was great. So I'm not going to start pulling apart reasons why they didn't. But that was 19 matches in a row before that one.
We still think you're a coaching genius, Calvin. Don't worry.
But, I mean, yeah, the disappointment. The only disappointment for them was, I think it was more of disappointment from the day before when they found out they couldn't play Queens.
Yeah.
Than actually losing the final match.
Well, they're both into the top 200 in doubles for the first time, I think, which is feels like a big achievement. And you're off to Ilkley Moor Bar Tat this week. Is that right?
Yeah, Ilkley from tomorrow. I think they'll play on Tuesday or Wednesday. So. They play the third seeds there, so it's tough at the minute.
But, this is the thing, like I'm not saying I'm someone who follows a lot of doubles ordinarily, and obviously with the guys you've got at the moment, we do keep a close eye on the doubles draws. They never look easy. They never, they're small draws. They're always reasonably strong.
Well, even though they're both inside the top 200, they would have needed a wild card. They wouldn't have got in. So they're in every match they play, unless they play the other wildcard team, who is also Luke, who I also coach.
Yeah.
They'll be the underdogs on ranking, and they have been in each match for the last 2 weeks as well. So, and that won't change going through maybe Eastbourne and Wimbledon.
How long has Luke been back for?
Luke has been back. He won. He played a tournament in Tunisia the week before last, and he won that. And then he didn't play last week at Nottingham, but he came down to train at Nottingham. And he's playing with Aidan McHugh this week, which is a last-minute change. He was supposed to be playing with Ali Gray, but then Ali got into the knock-on effect of the grass court season because Andy Murray made the final in Stuttgart, that meant somebody got in as a special exempt.
Yeah.
So then Ali Gray then moved into qualifying in Queens and moved out of Ilkley.
Yeah.
If your two teams play, which box do you sit in?
George, it's challenges, mate. They don't have boxes. It's not centre court.
Okay, which side of the court do you stand on?
Well, that doesn't.
You know, they swap ends in tennis, George.
Yeah, but you go to each side so you can coach.
No, it's never happened. They're in opposite sides. They're in opposite sides of the draw, so they're not.
When they're both in the final, who are you going to be coaching?
Well, both. They both win, don't you? So. Whoever wins. So I'm not gonna come on here and say, not that there's anything. I don't hope that either of them win. They're both players I coach. So,
Luke Henry, we're here to talk. If you need to talk about an abusive coaching relationship,
if they both make the final, I'll be overjoyed about it. And then if they both make the final, it'd probably mean they're both playing in Wimbledon as well. So.
I look forward to the tension of the Ilkley final this week. It could be quite something as Calvin does his Tony Nadal act and sits in the most conspicuous place possible.
We'll see films of him leaving after the first set when he decides he can't take it anymore.
Anyway, I wanted to use that as a way into talking about Nottingham, where, as I mentioned, Dan Evans picked up the title. It's obviously someone you know well, Calvin. I guess you would expect him to win that tournament, really, wouldn't you? Like, given his grass court experience, given that he is a top 30 player in the world, and given, it is a challenger in the end, it's not going to be the strongest field in the world.
Yeah, I'd expect him to win it, but it's always difficult playing the first tournament of the year on grass. He had some weird scheduling issues as well, like did Dan, like yesterday. Strange that they stuck him on 4th on.
Yeah.
With rain as well, and that meant that he'd got there early, because you have to get there early in case there's a retirement or something, or one match goes quick. So he was actually there. I noticed that he was there at 10 o'clock in the morning when I got there. And he was still on court at 7:40, I think, last night.
Yeah.
So at that stage, he'd been there nearly 11 hours at the tennis centre. And what's different what was different there yesterday? Obviously, most of the players have left. So they've got the huge players area at Nottingham for all the players with settees and catering and that kind of thing. And there was basically just no one there.
Yeah, rattling around a bit.
Yeah, so, you're just hanging around. Then it rained for an hour or so, and it just sort of delayed things. So,
and I guess you do end up spending quite a lot of emotional energy in that time. If you get it wrong, you can sort of go through peaks and troughs, and you must get good at just staying quite zen.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and Dan, he's quite sociable. He wanders around there chatting to most people who are around. So, but yeah, I expect him to win it, but that's not always the way it works. You've still got to play. And,
I imagine you saw a fair bit of him this week. He always talks about how much he wants to do well in the Grand Slams. He made the 3rd round of Wimbledon for, I think, the 3rd time in his career last year. I mean, because of the limitations of his game that we know and everything that he can do as well, do you think he needs a good draw and a fair wind, or actually has, given the way the tour is at the moment and with a pretty minimal number of decent grass court players, that he really has a shot at second week and who knows beyond?
I think so, yeah. But I think he can go deep. The thing with Evo is that you need, it's not really ranking wise. You need style of opponent. Right. I think is important with him. You don't want to see someone like Sebastian Korda again and that kind of thing. Some guy who's got a huge serve who can blow you off the court. God, we always have this smirking. Usually George starting the smirking. Yeah.
I wasn't even going to go there.
Yeah, so, but yeah, style of play. I think that's the most important thing.
Just needs to draw someone who can't blow him off. But
yeah,
be too hard.
But yeah, I actually didn't see much of him. You say I saw a lot of him this week. I didn't see much of him because he was generally tended to be on around about the same time the lads were going on. So I was going to stay and watch. I hung around a bit after the doubles yesterday. I was going to stay and watch him yesterday, but it just kept on raining, so I just went home at that stage.
You think if his career finished tomorrow and he'd only got to the 3rd round of Wimbledon, he'd be a bit disappointed? I know he's had like 4th round runs in Australia and the US, but it feels like considering how good he is on grass and does seem to suit him so well, do you think that would leave a bit of a bitter taste if he didn't get into the kind of second weekend, maybe?
Yeah, I think he'll always want to go further, though. I think that these guys, they're just so competitive that, say he makes quarterfinals, then he'd go, well, be disappointed he only won make quarterfinals and that kind of thing. So, I mean, he's not got a great draw at Queens, has he? It's a bit of a stinker.
No one in the Brits has got a good draw, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty challenging draw. I mean, it's a small draw,
The best draw of the Brits is probably, it seems strange to say it, is probably Ryan Peniston playing Casper Ruud. So we don't know.
Top seed Casper Ruud on grass. Yeah, don't really know.
Yeah.
Ruud did say the other week, I think it was a bit tongue in cheek, but grass is for golf. I think he said the other week.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, he definitely
was very tongue in cheek.
But I mean, Peno's been playing some great tennis lately, hasn't he?
Yes,
He's picked up some really big results.
Yeah.
For people who don't know Ryan Peniston, Calvin, I assume there are lots of them. I know he's left-handed. I watched him a bit the other week, but what does your coach's eye tell you about Peno?
I know Peno pretty well, very well actually. He's a good player, very competitive, makes a lot of balls, very, very quick around the court, takes the ball very early, stands on the baseline, very good at changing the direction of the ball, can sort of catch the ball in his racket, lefty. Good serve, good returner. He's tricky.
We know who's got the worst draw, don't we? Liam Brody paying fourth favourite for Wimbledon. Cilic.
That's a tough.
That is a really hard draw, to be fair. Yeah. I quite fancy Draper against Fritz. I kind of fancy him there. Fritz has lost some random matches on grass. I remember him losing to Jubb.
Yeah,
I quite fancy Draper there.
I mean, Draper's also on just such a gradient, at the moment. When he's fit, I had a chat with him today, which I think might be the first time I've actually chatted to him face to face, which is weird. And he's a super nice guy, and quite straight down the line. And I think still getting used to being in a room with 10 journalists and having to talk, because he would just stop, which I thought was very interesting. So, some people get trained to stop talking, like press officers might often say, You talk yourself into trouble. Like, decide what you're going to say it, and then just stop. But actually, as a journalist, that's what you don't want, because sometimes players don't say anything interesting. And what's really good, and actually, you take someone like Liam Brody or Andy Murray, both of whom are great value when they talk, is that they talk. You ask them a question and they talk around it, and they talk for a minute or two, and then you've got lots you can work with, and you can write a bit more copy. So, I think Jack's not a natural with it, but certainly seems like a good bloke, and I'm quite excited to watch him play, and I think he is actually pretty excited to play in a proper crowd atmosphere, because obviously when he was at Queen's last year and he beat Yannick Sinner, I think there were only maybe 1,000 people allowed in, if that, whereas it was really limited crowds, and it wasn't the same when you're in the bubble, whereas Queen's is a pretty intimate environment, but you can get a lot of people in there, and I think it'll be fun for him.
I really liked it last year because you could just walk around so much freer. It's like herding sheep, Queens. Normally, it's a really, really tight place. I think just going back to the Brits and these draws, I think 3 of them will go through. I think
3
Murray
out of
wins 7. Again. If Murray plays, I think he beats Sonego. I'm backing Draper against Fritz. I think Norrie will beat Dimitrov. I don't think Dimitrov's pulling up any trees this year, so I think he'll win that.
Is there any chance? I mean, maybe we've just seen Berrettini win a title, but Evans has also just won a title. I mean, Evans against Berrettini, Calvin, is that a terrible matchup for him? I sort of think that Dan's backhand slice might be able to cause him some problems, given that Berrettini has one such obvious weakness.
Yeah, but he's got such big weapons as well. He's got these
How many weapons?
2 weapons, George.
2 weapons, and he's not a lunatic. So, yeah.
2 weapons and 1 weakness less. Yeah, George, go on.
There was a really good stat I saw someone put on Twitter today. Sorry, I can't credit them because I can't remember who it was. But they'd tracked how many times Andy Murray on the return had managed to get the ball to the Berrettini backhand, and it was something like 2 across 3 sets.
I saw this in Matt Rackett's newsletter. And it was 2.
Yeah.
So it was the serve plus 1 backhand and forehand stats, and Matt's newsletter called The Racket, which I would recommend to anyone.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's very interesting. Serve plus 1 on Berrettini's first serve, 15 out of 25. Serve plus 1 on Berrettini's first serve backhand, 1 out of 2. So, I mean, I guess, Calvin, you might disagree with this, but that would tell you that Murray wasn't getting enough of a piece of the Berrettini first serve to get it to his backhand, because everything that was coming back he could run around and put his forehand on.
Yeah, because one thing I'm certain of is that Andy will have known that he's normally implicit with his preparation in terms of the data and that kind of thing. He would know exactly what he wanted to do, and it would have been get the ball to Berrettini's backhand. So if he can't get the ball there, and he's one of the top 5 returners of all time, it's going to be tough for anybody to get it there.
I thought the courts looked pretty quick in Stuttgart this week as well, to be fair. Like, maybe it was just sometimes the look isn't the same as what they are, but they looked very dry and very worn, which
they
was
looked very bad.
They looked rubbish. Looked awful.
Yeah.
We sort of glossed over Berrettini a little bit earlier. I mean, he can win Wimbledon, can't he, this year? Like, if Novak's not quite as hot as we think, I mean, he's a serious contender. I know that's obviously given he went to the final last year, but that experience should work pretty well.
I think the only reason we hadn't talked about him was because he hadn't played, and so we had no idea how fit he was. And I think
that's why he was behind Cilic in my initial rankings. I'm willing to push
honestly,
Cilic to 5
I think you might
now.
have to be banned from saying the name Marin Cilic for the next week. I can't do with this.
Only one player has beaten him in his last 3 grass court tournaments.
Yeah.
So, who's the top seed at Queens this week?
Casper Ruud.
Berrettini's going to win. If he gets through Murray and Evans, he's going to win.
Would you fancy Murray in a rematch? Like, would he be able to change much?
That
serves so hard. I mean, it was a close match today anyway, to be fair. But
I'd be inclined to think that I would fancy Murray in a rematch, actually, because I don't think he would have those lower numbers again on that. So I think that he would improve those. Home crowd, near his house. Look, it's little things.
It was a super tight final. Like it really was. It only really got away from Murray at the end, and actually it didn't even get away from that far because his ab went.
And it's worth saying that it was night and day from their last meeting on grass, where Berrettini absolutely destroyed him. I mean, he really just took the racket right out of his hand. So I think that shows where Murray is this year compared to kind of previous years, because that was a pretty painful viewing match, to be honest. I was in the stands for that one. I do also think Berrettini can get a bit tight. Like, I definitely think in the right situations, he definitely gets tight. And, a roaring Andy Murray, with neck veins pulsing and a Queen's crowd that gets up for it a bit, I think that's a pretty good situation for getting tight. He definitely looked it in the final against Djokovic when the crowd were really up for it. And Djokovic, he was just softballing it to his backhand on the second serve, and Berrettini just couldn't cope with it.
You tend to you find that the players who get tight are the players that have glaring weaknesses in their game, because they're aware of it. No one's aware of it more than them, and they know that what can happen here. So I suppose it's probably the thing you do the most technical work on. And I mean, you will know, Calvin, that the worst time to be thinking about technical stuff is in the middle of a match. Absolutely.
And I'm funnily enough, and it's not the same level, but I was playing cricket for the first time in a while on Saturday. And when I was batting, I was thinking about something I'd been working on over the winter. And I caught myself doing it. And I thought, you can't think about that. It's not going to be helpful to be thinking about that now. Just get in your zone and focus. And naturally, I got 21 and we didn't win. If George can talk about his tennis, then I can talk about my cricket. It's probably a similar level. We should talk a bit about the WTA, because we haven't really touched on it thus far. They are in Berlin in the week coming up. It was a really stacked draw. It is now a slightly less stacked draw, because I think they originally had 9 of the top 10 players in the world in it. There have been 5 withdrawals since. So Swiatek, Kontaveit, Badosa, Pegula and Daniel Collins have all pulled out. Swiatek citing a right shoulder injury, but we don't think it's anything particularly serious. Just maybe played a lot of tennis over the last couple of months, which, in fairness, she has. So we've got Jabeur, Sakari, Sabalenka, Pliskova all in the draw for Berlin. George, I assume you're not worried about Swiatek being out of that event?
No. She kind of pulled out Madrid, didn't she, before the French Open? She seems to me to have got quite streetwise this year, just in terms of preparing for the tournaments kind of correctly, physically and mentally. So I'm not at all worried for her, really. And I think we've kind of said it before, the way she's playing at the minute, I don't think it really matters what the surface is for her to be considered the outright favourite. And I think, did you send those odds into the group last week, Calvin, where they had like the number 2 favourite was Raducanu and she was like 12 to 1, which is ludicrous. But I think that just goes to show where the women's game is at the minute. Like Swiatek is the clear favourite. And on the grass, it just feels like there's not really that many. I mean, Goff will have another good chance to go deep. Yeah. She played really well here before, obviously off the back of the French Open. So
I mean, the current second favourite for Wimbledon women's title is Naomi Osaka, who isn't playing. So
she's definitely out, Osaka.
I'm fairly sure that she has confirmed that, hasn't she? Has she not already pulled out? I'd have to check.
I thought she kind of just said she wasn't sure about it, but was still on the entry list.
I'll have to check the entry list, but I thought she had pulled out. She hasn't withdrawn from the entry list yet. All right, fine.
Yeah,
but
and if there's, as we mentioned last week, if half points coming back, then that should encourage her to play. If the points are what's motivating her at the minute, getting up the rankings.
If some butts were candies and nuts, George. Looking at the WTA Berlin draw, by the way, a couple of absolutely beautiful first rounders. Top seed Ons Jabeur against Karolina Muchova. I know Muchova is more of a clay courter than a grass court player, but
she's done well at Wimbledon before. I really rate Muchova, as I've bleated on about before. She's someone, if she's fit, who can go really far in Wimbledon.
Yeah,
but she's probably not fit.
The other one I want to mention is Maria Sakkari, the number 2 seed, against Leolia Jean-Jean, who is the French player who people who listen to the podlets over the French Open may have heard about before. She was an absolutely prodigious junior. She had a serious knee injury when she was 14 that saw her lose her 10-year Nike contract that she already had. She had a full-time coach from the FFT from the age of 10. She stopped playing tennis for a while. She talks openly about gaining weight and not really being interested in sport anymore. And then she went to America. She went to 3 different colleges there. She did a degree in sociology and criminal justice, and then she did an MBA in finance at Lynn University, where she really excelled. And then she made the 3rd round of the French Open this year. She was somewhat helped along the way by playing Karolina Pliskova, who it turned out had COVID. But nevertheless, she got to the 3rd round. It's bumped her miles up the rankings, and it's a bit of a fairy tale story, really, for the French, because she was someone who we thought we might never see the best of, and all of a sudden she's fighting her way up the rankings.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. I think speaking of Pliskova, she's playing Kanepi first round. If that was a slam, you'd guarantee she'd lose in that. But
I think
she might have a better chance.
I mean, are we not backing? I mean, do we not just not back Karolina Pliskova most of the time these days? It's quite hard to get behind her.
The player I was going to say, I'm not saying this is the best match on paper, but I'm most interested in this week is Andreescu. She's playing Siniakova. I really felt there were signs she was kind of back at it in the clay. And I know we've kind of said she's never won a Wimbledon match before, but I'm kind of hoping this might be the year she arrives actually in form, fit, and can have a bit of a run, because she's definitely got the game that should be more than good enough to do some serious damage and potentially take out someone like Swiatek. She's got every weapon in the book for a grass court event. So I'll be watching eagerly this week to see how she gets on.
The other one I'm going to give you to watch is Belinda Bencic against Jules Niemeyer. If only because she's a German wildcard. She was in qualifying at the French Open and she hit the biggest first serve of the entire tournament. She's only 5'10", but she gives it a blooming whack. So if you like tennis balls getting hit really hard, you might fancy that one.
Did she take a set off Sloane Stephens? Is that who she was playing round 1 at the French? That's an excellent knowledge if that's right. I'm pretty sure that was her first round, and then Sloane
she absolutely did, George.
Flying.
Well done, very good from you. And then she lost 5-7, 6-4, 6-2. But yeah, so maybe just one to keep an eye on if you like big hitting. The other story that I mentioned at the top of the show, which is worth talking about, is Sue Barker stepping down from Wimbledon coverage. A fine story with Mike Dixon of the Daily Mail, talking about her reasons for doing so. She said she nearly stepped down in 2017, but that she decided to keep going, and she's delighted that she did. To an extent, what kind of pushed her to step down was the fact that her mother passed away sadly earlier this year. She said that she had always spoken to her mum about the tennis a lot, and ringing her up and speaking about that, and that she felt it was the right time to go. I mean, I think, certainly for me and George, and to a certain extent Calvin, she is the sort of face of Wimbledon, and I think as soon as you mention Subaka, you always associate with. Although I watched a lot of Question of Sport as well, in fairness, which I always thought she was brilliant at. George, why don't you start with a bit of Sue? I mean, she's just sort of comfortable presence, really, isn't she?
Yeah, she is. She's an excellent anchor. I think, it's often one of the most underrated skills on television to kind of successfully anchor. And you only really, obviously there's some really good ones out there. People like Gary Lineker who've kind of really made a bit of an art form of it and very kind of relaxed. But when you see a bad anchor, you notice how hard it is to kind of keep it really organic. I think she has always done that really well. She's very personable. I've seen her in many a media canteen throughout the grass season, kind of just chatting with loads of people. She always seems very nice from afar. I've not really had much to do with her personally, but she's seemed like she's got quite a glowing, personable presence in person as well as on the TV. And as you say, yeah, very kind of warm. And it's going to be weird, isn't it, without her next year? And I don't know if they've announced who will be replacing her or what, but it's quite really tough shoes to follow. And I think, she's one of these anchors, again, I've just mentioned Lineker, but kind of got that gravitas of being like a Grand Slam winner, but you almost forget because they're so good an anchor, you're not really thinking about them necessarily getting the job just because they're...
I mean, people have always forgotten that Subaka won the French Open in the 70s. Yeah. I mean, didn't they fail to put her name on the trophy at one point? Or they put her on Australian...
wrong nationality. She's Australian, yeah.
I mean, it's always bad when you win a Grand Slam and the actual tournament sort of forgets who you are.
It was a bit of a dodgy year as well, wasn't it? Because I think there was a bit of a boycott from a lot of very best players.
There are a cracking set of stories about that, that French Open, which are definitely worth rereading. There was a great BBC feature a few years ago. Calvin, you of course vaguely remember her as a player and then later as a broadcaster. I mean,
no, I do not.
Come on.
Player. No,
when did she retire? I think she retired.
She won the French Open before I was born.
That's very disappointing. I haven't done my maths properly. I can't imagine you remember someone before her presenting Wimbledon then, since you're so young.
Who would have presented it before her? Was it Des?
I was thinking it feels like it would be a Des Lynam thing, doesn't it? But I don't remember. I don't think it will have been Des though. I don't know. I feel like Des wouldn't have lost the gig that early to Barker.
No, but then football started becoming big, and I think Des was kind of because he used to do grandstand.
He used to do grandstand and stuff, didn't he?
Yeah. So I think it probably was Des, and then football sort of around 93, 94 went to a different level, and Match of the Day became a really big thing.
But they don't clash though, do they? So you'd think he could have kind of carried on both.
Yeah, but I think it was like...
I can confirm that Des Lynam was previously the lead presenter of Wimbledon.
Yeah. There we go. Big Des, love it.
The real story though, or the real talk... Sorry, Calvin, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say that when George said they don't clash, they do. The World Cups and the Euros clash.
Yeah, fair enough.
The real story, I suppose, and the thing that really everyone's been talking about is who will replace her as the Wimbledon anchor. I know it's created quite a lot of chat on social media. The names being flung around are Tracy Austin, Claire Balding, John McEnroe, Tim Henman's even been mentioned. I've got my own thoughts as to who will get it, which we'll get onto. George, if you were picking, who would you go for?
Well, I'm not saying I wouldn't go for him, but there's absolutely no way it'll be John McEnroe.
And why?
Far too much money, and he's got commitments with the ESPN that he also gets paid ludicrous amounts for. So, and he there was a big scandal the other year, wasn't there, around kind of how much they were paying people, and Navratilova was calling it sexist because McEnroe was barely doing any work for Wimbledon, but was still their kind of top paid broadcaster. So there's no way he'd blow their entire budget, I think, if he became the anchor, given it such a full on role. Tracy Austin would be quite an interesting one, to be fair. I hadn't really seen her linked to the post. That could be
just a name. What always happens, I got sent a list by a bookie who shall remain nameless, and I said, what on earth is this? And he said, I think they just took the Olympic list and basically went with that. So Hazel Irvine, Gabby Logan, Dan Walker, Jason Mohammed, the kind of usual BBC bods.
I'd say it's more likely to be a British person, to be honest, rather than like a Tracy Austin.
I think, there's a sort of gravitas.
Gabby Logan, maybe, but I don't know. You kind of want someone who's got a bit of pedigree within tennis. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, they've got a year to work it out, right? Like, this is going to be Subaka's last Wimbledon she's going to do this year, and they've got time to work it out. The person I think it might end up being is Issa Guha, the former England cricketer who has worked a lot on TMS and on the cricket coverage. She's a big sports fan. I know she's doing some reporting on Wimbledon this year as well, so I wonder if that might be a bit of a sort of screen test for her, see how she goes down with audiences. You know, she's obviously be a different looking face as well. You know, she's got a different heritage. It takes away from the kind of white, stale, male and pale kind of image of Wimbledon, which I think would be pretty positive. So, yeah, I can see them going for someone like that. Calvin, I know you've got strong feelings on Claire Balding.
Yeah, I don't want to see Claire Balding doing it. I don't think she's very good.
You were much more diplomatic about it earlier. You just said it was basically Sue Barker 15 years ago.
Yeah, well, it is that. You know, I don't enjoy her presenting, to be honest. I get why people do like her, that kind of thing, but I just think she's a bit posh and, yeah, not really what I think we need. I think Marcus Buckland's good, although he doesn't work for the BBC. And he knows tennis. He's an excellent anchor, that kind of thing. As I said in the group, I'd go left field on it. I think Jenny Drummond would be the best person for it. I've worked with her. She's top class. She knows her stuff. She definitely knows tennis. She presents rugby on BT, which I don't watch because I don't like rugby. I think it's crap. But
just finding random people to throw punches at.
I was going to say we've had 1-star reviews for hating Nadal. We clearly
but Jenny interviews well. She's a really good presenter, and I think that they need to move to a younger generation. I really do think that with tennis. I'd get someone, whoever it is, I get someone younger, because I don't want to. I'm fed up of tuning into Wimbledon. We'll see it at Queen's. I guarantee you, in the coming week, there'll be a studio at Queen's this week where the youngest person in there is about 65 years old. Yeah, and we've got to stop with the tennis.
They keep rolling Henman out, don't they? He's normally keeping the average.
Yeah, but he is getting older.
He is old.
There are many things Tim Henman can do, but circumvent the aging process is not one of them.
Yeah, but you know, I think Tim's quite good. I think in the studio. To be fair, I don't like him as a co-commentator, but I think he's good in the studio. That's fine. But look, if Tim Henman's the youngest person in the studio, you've got some issues.
Yeah, Tim Henman, who's 47, for those who are wondering, which is only just over the average age of. I think that's only just over the average age of a voter in the UK. Go on, George.
I was going to say, just on Claire Balding, my lasting memory of Claire Balding is that I once went to go and play a kind of championship tiebreak against Alfie Hewitt, who's one of the kind of wheelchair tennis players, and I arrived just after Claire Balding. She'd been absolutely battered by him, didn't get a point, was stood there having a fag, looking breathless straight away. So that's my enduring memory of Claire Balding.
I think what's important here is I've said this on the pod before, is that terrestrial television sport is transformative in what it can do for the sport. And I remember specifically the change that went through cricket around the 2005 Ashes, where it moved from BBC, where it was stale and coverage came on 5 minutes before the first ball, and
Channel 4.
And then it moved to Channel 4, and it was completely different. 2005 was the first, I think it was first and only season that Channel 4 had. But Channel 4 basically
I think they had a couple of years, but just none of them were as popular or as widely seen.
And look, what happened in 2005 obviously had an effect on it, and you can make, who couldn't make good television out of that series? But they transformed it, and everything that Sky now do with cricket was created that summer on Channel 4. And I think that tennis, we would see the public perception of it change if you get a younger group of people presenting it.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. You know, Wimbledon has a certain image, and I don't think as a young person you really would want to get behind it. I don't think you would be necessarily interested in it.
Look, I'm not a young person by any stretch.
Famously,
as James points out twice every podcast that we do. but if I was a 15-year-old person now and I was flicking channels when you get home from school, and there's a bit of sport on, but they're talking in the studio, do you want to see 3 65-year-olds discussing what's happening while it's raining?
And I think actually the point is that if you're 15 years old, you don't channel flick now. You're on TikTok or you're on YouTube, and even then, if you see that it's the same thing though.
Yeah.
If you're flicking through TikTok, you're swiping up, and I know how TikTok works because I'm young, and you see 3 people you've never heard of who are as you say 65 years old. It's not exactly appealing. So there's definitely more work to be done. We await with interest to see who the BBC end up going for. I'm going to open up any other business for a minute, George, if you have anything to submit. Oh, he's doing the face he does when he doesn't have anything. And I can assure you, I've seen it only once before.
I don't think I've got anything else. Did we mention Alexandrova and Haddad Meyer's titles?
No, we absolutely didn't. It's been quite an ATP heavy week.
It has. To be fair, Brit heavy, I would say. That would be my qualifying statement. We've had a lot of British success this week, which isn't typically common, so we need to hone in on it when it does happen.
But yes, Beatriz Haddad Meyer did the double in Nottingham. She won the women's singles, beating Alison Risk, and she also won
a good win. Risk is a good grass player.
Yeah. She beat some really decent players along the way. She beat Teresa Martinkova. She knocked out Maria Sakkari, who admittedly hasn't been brilliant on grass. She beat Lily Miyazaki, who I should have mentioned earlier on, picked up her first top 100 win in the first round in Nottingham. She used to represent Japan. She now represents Britain. She's been to college in the US. I think she's 26. She seems like a really nice girl, and was just interested to meet her for the first time and see her win in the first round. But Haddad Meyer also won the doubles with Zhang Shui, who in fairness is an absolutely elite doubles partner if you can get hold of her. I also know for a fact that she was asking Thanasi Kokkinakis to play mixed doubles with her at Wimbledon, and he was like, I think I just ghosted her, mate. And I was like, Thanasi, that's like practically a guaranteed title if you'd said yes. Meanwhile, Ekaterina Alexandrova won the title in Rosemarlin, using your tip from earlier, George. Nice. She beat Arina Sabalenka 7-5, 6-love in the final. Arina Sabalenka had one of those sets that she quite often has where she just turns into a hot mess. And
how many double faults?
I don't have that stat exactly to hand, but she only served 4 in the whole match, so maybe it wasn't as bad as well. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is mainly my favourite interview moment from either last year or the year before, is Arina Sabalenka in her post-match being like, and only 3 double faults, and like pumping the air.
Maybe that's the news. Maybe this is the new story of the season that's replacing Tim, is that Sabalenka's kind of fixed her serve. Because it was so dramatically bad at the start.
I'm very, very reticent to start saying that Arina Sabalenka's like fixed her serve so close to Wimbledon, because generally it has become traditional for me to get excited about Arina Sabalenka maybe winning a Grand Slam about a week before Wimbledon, and I don't think it goes well for her. So,
Alvin thinks she's never winning one, doesn't he? And that's one of his
which in fairness,
hot takes.
To bet against me is probably a pretty safe hedge, so I can get behind that. That really is all we've got time for this week. Thank you so much for listening and for all your feedback and emails and Twitter comments. And I'm sorry if I haven't got around to reading them all. There are many of you these days, and it's much harder to read all of them. But thank you very much for listening and being in touch. Thank you for leaving us reviews, those who can and who have. If you've forgotten to do it up till now, please make sure you do. And most importantly, come back next week.
Social Podcast Network.
Love tennis with Matchpoint Tennis Championships. Get your rackets ready for a thrilling and immersive tennis gameplay experience. Pre-order now from Game.